Let me go to Vern. Vern calling us from South Dakota. Hey, Vern.
Good morning. I got a quick question.
Good morning.
If Congress does not increase the debt ceiling, can the Fed continue this monetary easing? I'm going to listen off here.
Okay, great question. So, if they don't increase the debt ceiling, then what happens is you can't just keep printing money once you have printed, what you need to cover your debt. So the monetary easing that the Fed is doing, it's not a matter of whether they can continue it. It might be hindered by the fact that the Treasury Department is not going to be able to issue the debt in which the Fed is buying. So the Fed is buying $85 billion worth of debt a month. $85 billion. That means that we, the government, can print $85 billion a month over and knowing that we have at least a buyer for that $85 billion, because you have to have a buyer, because it's the buyer that monetizes, gets it into the system. So let's say they can estimate that China and Japan are going to buy another $100 billion a month, which isn't the case, but are going to buy $100 billion. They are free to print, or they are free to issue in debt $185 billion, because they know they got the Treasury over here buying $85 billion. So it limits, what it's going to do is limit the amount of debt that they're going to issue. Now, is that going to stop the Fed? No, because what happens is there's about $100 billion turnover every month in the debt of the government. What that means is there is roughly around $100 billion of debt that is issued. These are bonds, T-bills, short-term bonds, long-term bonds, mid-term bonds, 10-year 30s, 5s, and Treasury bills, which are like CDs, that are issued, that come due every month to the tune of about $100 billion. So let's say you have a $100 billion bond and it comes due this month. It matures. You have a choice. You can either take your money in cash, get out of it, or you can just roll it over into another bond. So they're always going to be able to print enough money to turn over the debt that comes due. Now, the only thing that would really change that is if people start saying, I don't want another piece of the United States debt. Give me my money. I want cash. If that were to happen in any kind of dramatic fashion, we'd be in big trouble, because the Treasury Department doesn't have that money. So they wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, so remember that, that's a huge issue for the Treasury Department every month. It's only an issue as it relates to people that are cashing that debt in. So as long as they're turning it over, then, the Fed can continue to buy enough new debt so they can continue to print. So it's a little bit complicated, but it is going, if it were to be prolonged, yes, it would hinder could hinder the amount of debt in which the Fed could buy, but it's got nothing to do with the Fed being allowed to, able to, or willing to do. It has nothing to do with that. So, but, the dysfunction in Washington, folks, it's important to realize that the dysfunction in Washington and the incompetence and the lack of leadership, the true deficit in Washington, the lack of leadership, what that creates is a global attention to all of that. So there's this global attention to the fact that, we're so incompetent and dysfunctional. And when the world sees that, it doesn't matter whether we default on our debt. It doesn't matter whether we continue the government shutdown. What it does is it puts a little bit of fear into what they now believe is very safe and secure. Okay, so it does. It has to impact global demand for our debt, and that's not a good thing for a country that can't thrive, live on anything but a lot of debt.